Right, well, it's hit 2 o'clock and there's lots to get through. So let's get started. Hi everyone. My name is William Gibb and I work for the Carbon Literacy project. So along with my colleague Miranda Cooper, we're all here to support you deliver carbon literacy to your council. So we're in the process of developing a free to access toolkit for parish and town councils. So today we'll be giving you a sneak peek of the toolkit, which will be launching early next year. Next slide, please, Miranda. Fantastic. To start off with, a few bits of housekeeping. So we're recording and your videos and mics are off for the moment, but we will be going into breakout rooms later on, so you have the opportunity to interact. And at this point, your video and sound will be under your control. But don't worry, we won't be recording then. And as we're going along, please do pop any questions that you have into the chat, and we'll try and answer questions as we go. But there will also be time for Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. So I'll briefly explain how the parish and town councils has come about. So in the early days of carbon literacy, an organisation would write a carbon literacy course with our help and support, which we would then accredit. And then Patrick Alcorn from the UK Government Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, or BEIS for short, really liked what we were doing and realised that there was huge potential to speed up the rollout of carbon literacy. So BEIS offered us the funding to develop off-the-shelf toolkit courses that were highly adaptable, yet easy to use for 5 different public sector audiences, so that individuals and organisations within those sectors could come along and pick it up, adapt a few slides, and then use it to deliver carbon literacy training that was really specific to their needs. Next slide, please. So due to the success of the toolkits, we're now in the process of developing a toolkit for parish and town councils to provide councillors with the support and the materials to deliver a day's worth of carbon literacy training to fellow councillors. So it empowers councillors to communicate why addressing climate change can lead to positive co-benefits for their community, and also how constituents can make informed low carbon choices. So it also allows councillors to learn about the basic science behind climate change, emissions under their influence, and how they can mobilise change. So the materials can be delivered face-to-face or distance delivered. It's free to access for certified carbon literacy training within town and parish councils. But something to note is that there is a £10 certification application fee per individual. The reason why that's there is because councillors must commit to both a significant individual and group action to reduce their carbon footprint. And so we then assess action pledges, and successful participants are awarded a certificate to evidence their carbon literacy. So something that's important to note is that as we are the accreditation body, so we award the certificates, we don't deliver the training. So when it comes to delivering the training, if you would like someone external to do this, that's also an option, and we can recommend external trainers. Next slide, please, Miranda. So the toolkit consists of all the resources that you need to deliver training to fellow councillors. So it includes slides, activity resources, a comprehensive trainer manual, and a getting started pack. So there's several slides within the toolkit which are designed to be customised so that they're specific to your council, for example, your location, your climate strategy, and your carbon footprint. So to trial the materials, we've enlisted the help of a group of parish and town councillors to pilot the toolkit. Without further ado, I'll ask our first guest speaker, Christiane, to introduce herself and tell us a bit more about why she is supporting the development of the toolkit and why she feels that carbon literacy is important for councillors. So over to you, Christiane.
Thank you very much, Will. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, all good. Perfect. Thank you. So good afternoon. My name is Christiane Startin Laurent, and I am going to share my experience in a short presentation on why carbon literacy is important and relevant for town and parish councillors, and also why I'm going to pilot the course and get involved in the training. So a quick disclaimer to start. I'm not representing my council during this session. I'm here expressing and sharing my own views and experiences on the subject of carbon literacy training for town councils. So yeah, just first of all, let me introduce myself and give you a bit of my background for you to understand why I am here today. I am training carbon literacy to small and medium businesses, including sole traders and micro businesses, and I also help a fellow carbon literacy trainer in the area where I'm in Leicestershire to train out carbon literacy to local residents, people who live and work here in Leicestershire. I've also shared my thoughts and experiences from a town councillor point of view, initially with Will and Miranda when they were thinking about putting a parish and town council toolkit together. I've also been a town councillor for over 2 years now, Bornston Town Council in Leicestershire, and we are currently going through the process of adopting and going through the climate change strategy. So we're now actually at the point where we're doing a carbon audit to really get a baseline to see where we're at. So what better point to really go ahead and now start with the carbon literacy training in our council. Previous to that, I have been working in different businesses in an SME or corporate retail, both in the food and fashion sector. And a lot of times I can draw on that experience when I do train out carbon literacy as well. Next slide, please. So why should you roll out the carbon literacy for town and parish councils toolkit in your council? So really it's to provide your councillors with the knowledge on what climate change is all about, as Will mentioned earlier on, and how it affects you in your community. The great thing is it is tailored. You can adapt some of the slides, so it really makes it relevant to people in your council. It's also providing you with tools and resources, be it with concrete examples from other councils, what they have done, what worked well for them, and what you can learn from them. I think that is always really very useful. And finally, to get town and parish councils to spring into action, feel confident about tackling climate change, and ultimately this can only be achieved by changing our behaviour. So this is again why the training is so good. Just to give you a flavour of some of the participants, what they say when they finish a carbon literacy course. Lots of them say, well, they wish they'd done it before. They found it very inspiring and energizing. So they understand afterwards the urgency of the situation, and they feel motivated and knowledgeable to jump into action. Next slide, please. So the reason why I'm piloting carbon literacy course at my council is that I know how good the course is. It provides great information, resources and examples to help and support our council and residents to reach their climate strategy targets. And it's ultimately to improve the lives of our community, really. This is why we're doing it, so that we can combat climate change and the effects it has on us. To give you an example, it could help to improve air quality for the most vulnerable in our community through tree planting schemes or looking at active travel schemes to reduce the use of fossil fuel cars. So these are all things that a town council can help to achieve. So as part of that, we shouldn't forget that town and parish councillors should be leading by example, and we also have a statutory and regulatory responsibility and powers. And also we should be an enabler for the local people to help them and support them in the way to change their behaviour. Next slide, please. So climate change cannot be tackled by one person alone or a few people at the council. This means collaboration is key, be it between councillors and council staff, residents, community groups, schools, local businesses and organisations, however big or small. You need to get everybody involved to get the best buy-in, and this is why the carbon literacy training is so helpful and useful. Finally, the course also provides you with tools on how to communicate what you have learned and want to achieve with all the stakeholders that I just mentioned before, which Pete will afterwards give us a bit of a flavour for in the activity that we're doing. But I will first now hand you over to Belinda, who will speak about her experience on delivering the pilot training. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Christiane. Can you hear me okay? I'll assume that's a yes. So I'm Belinda. I'm a town councillor in Lyme Regis in the beautiful area on the border between Devon and Dorset. And as a geographer, I've been dismayed over the last decades really about the lack of action. So on climate, the climate crisis. So decided to stand myself as town council. I've co-founded the Dorset Climate Action Network, and I'm also on the National Association of Local Councils Climate Change Task and Finish Group. Next slide, please. So the NALC group conducted a survey just before the pandemic, actually, and at that stage, 35% of town and parish councils had passed climate emergency declarations, but less than 6% of them had calculated their own carbon footprint. And the two main reasons cited for the sort of lack of action between the declaration and putting things into reality was obviously funding, but also lack of skills and knowledge. So I've been interested in carbon literacy training for some time. Next slide, please. So I was delighted to be invited to be part of this pilot. And so we ourselves, Lyme Regis Town Council, passed our Climate and Environmental Declaration in July 2019 and set a target of net zero by 2030. And we also committed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But putting all of that aspiration into action has been more difficult. As I say, I was delighted to be invited to be part of this pilot, and I ran a carbon literacy workshop on the 28th of October with councillors from Lyme Regis and also from Seaton over in East Devon and from Charmouth, our neighbouring village, as well as officers from Dorchester and Lyme Regis Town Councils. Next slide, please. And it was really interesting. It was all of the things that Christiane has mentioned in terms of being inspiring, being surprising, being very stimulating and motivating. And I think confidence is one of the words that she referred to, which I think you could see throughout the day that people in the room were gaining in confidence in terms of understanding their roles as town and parish councillors. I think our survey of a couple of years ago showed that town and parish councillors often feel that they haven't got much power to do anything. But as our responses to the climate emergency are going to be hyper-local, and as we build community resilience and practical solutions, then town and parish councils have a huge role to play. It's very varied. So throughout the day, we're looking at videos, there are graphs explaining the science. There are lively discussions on every topic. We had some photographs of local impact. So less than a week before the course, we'd had a month's worth of rainfall falling in one evening. And our council works team had been out lifting huge trees out of our tiny river, which had also taken away a couple of wooden footbridges with them. So it was tying that kind of local event into our global knowledge of understanding of climate change and what the impacts are going to be at a local level. So I think those images really hit home. And also the carbon footprint that you can see there is a consumption-based per household footprint. And they were quite different between the four communities that were represented in the room. So that stimulated quite a lot of interest and discussion about what could the differences be for. And also to sort of guide us towards the priorities for climate action. And also just to say that emotions were running quite high, up and down, but definitely you know, you could see light bulbs popping on with people sort of realizing and getting the urgency and understanding bits and pieces that perhaps hadn't made sense before. Next slide, please. So the feedback was really positive, and as Christiane mentioned, people felt really motivated. So these were some of the comments that I received. For example, I came out at the end of the meeting convinced of the need to react now and not tomorrow. That greatly pleased me, and I particularly liked, I feel more informed and therefore more empowered. And obviously meeting other people and discussing different ideas about how we can sort of collectively meet this challenge. Next slide, please. Some of the ideas that emerged from the discussion included some very practical and doable ideas, like improving the existing community bus service to serve the whole village. So thereby encouraging people to use the local shops instead of driving to the neighbouring towns, which might have a better supermarket, but also reducing social isolation and making people feel more part of their community. Another one was to reopen the Jurassic Centre building as a green hub to educate and inform everybody about the transition to green energy. And what people can do on a sort of individual and household basis, as well as more, you know, how it fits into the national context. And then working collectively with our neighbouring councils. It was good to have a mix of councillors from the different parishes to sort of compare and contrast, but also to see how we can work together, to listen to our local communities and working together to bring about change. And on that note, I shall be handing over to Alan, who is also in a very gorgeous part of the world. So let's hear about how they've been getting on in Shropshire.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Alan Wilson, and I'm also here with my Vice Chair, Richard Watkins from SOS CIO, which is a charity which is pushing this across the whole of Shropshire. That's what SOS stands for, Save Our Shropshire. Anyway, we've hooked up with the Carbon Literacy project to get this underway. And we believe, as a charity and pushing this out, and I wear two hats because I'm also the vice chair to the Shropshire Association of Local Councils. So I wanted a holistic approach across the whole of the county if I could achieve it. And the idea is to change behaviour, and that way we're trying to get people to commit to combating climate change across the county and using people. There are various ways to do this, as you know. You can influence them through environmental stuff, but the real thing is that we won't be able to avoid this disaster unless we get people to change their habits and their behaviours. And we believe this is the right way through education, and the Carbon Literacy Trust approach to this is the right way. So as Kennedy said, and Prince William used quite recently in Earthshot, and we've adopted it, we say, ask not what your county can do for you, ask what you can do for your county. Next slide, please. So as we look at Shropshire as a whole, it's got two unitary authorities. And the real issue that we've got is addressing everybody in that area of Shropshire. And it's changing their behaviour, and it's through engaging people that we hope to achieve that. Next slide, please. So as we look at Shropshire as a whole, there are just over 500,000 people. They have got over 200,000 households in there, 20-odd thousand businesses, and over 140 school establishments. But the main thing is the whole of the county area is broken down into 250 town and parish councils and parish meeting areas. And our influence is to try and involve every one of those councils in this. So this tool that the Carbon Literacy Project have built is ideal for this purpose. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we're trying to influence those, and this course that we've put together and piloted with the Carbon Literacy Project is really changing things. As I can tell you, as we've piloted the course, next slide, please. The ambition was to approach town and parish leaders about this, and we've done that across the county, slowly and but surely, through presentations that I gave prior to us coming to this, influencing them to come on board. As a result of identifying town and parish councils that are interested, they themselves have got people in the parish or the town council that are climate champions. These would be your local network groups like Network 21 or Sustainable, whatever they want to call themselves. And it's investing in those people locally. And that way you then identify the people that you want to educate on a voluntary basis within that group. And then in turn picks up the carbon literacy project scheme of the householder course as well. So having achieved this with our parish councils, you get the audience of the chair and the various parties, bring them all together and then do a carbon literacy course. Then you bring in the householder course that the Carbon Literacy Project have put together. And that way you can influence them towards the net zero goals of the future, of which one will definitely be a dietary one. So eat less meat, waste less for sure. But when it comes to drive electric cars, this is perceptual because not everyone can afford an electric car. So what is it about driving, walking, cycling, and those type of things? Next slide, please. Okay, so how do we get the real solution to this problem across? It's through education, and it's the education to engage and get them to act. Next slide, please. And hopefully, and you will see, if you come on board with the Carbon Literacy Project in these courses, what you're doing is talking to people and saying to them, okay, this is what you need to know. Never mind what you read. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Just listen to these simple facts that we're putting across here. That helps them then to unlearn, because it is a change behavior method that we're applying here. It helps them then to assimilate this information that you're giving to them. They then take it on board. They internalize that, and because that then is asked of them when they're on the course, they make these pledges. Those pledges are for individual action and for collective action amongst their town and parish. It could be anything within that pledge. So it's carbon footprint reduction, getting electric vehicle charging points in place, getting the buildings under your care changed to renewable energy, looking up and giving free access to properties so that you can run repair cafes, all the things that councils can influence and get underway. That way, the change behavior starts to take place. It's not only internalized, it's actually an action now. And that then makes the actions of yourself become more natural. You don't think about it anymore. You are on that journey now to success towards net zero by 30. Having got all these things in place, you may want to join a like-minded group. They want to promote more stuff. You as a council can support that. And that way you do that, you can support them either with whatever means, like I say, with buildings or support, or as stuff comes across your desk as a councillor, you can influence planning by saying, that's not really good in the respect of the requirements for energy saving in the future. It's built in the wrong place, it floods. All these things you have local knowledge of, so you can make these measures and get them into place. And of course, the measure of success, which I've seen in the chat already, is how do you know that you as a parish as a whole are achieving that? Where there's a tool, and it's called Impact Tool. You can look it up. It was developed by Exeter University in conjunction with the Centre for Sustainable Energy at Bristol, and it is called Impact Tool, and it gives every parish in England their carbon footprint, and that way you can see how your measurements are working. Work with the community, as it says, work in collaboration to get these things running and get into delivering carbon literacy, because it is a vehicle to get change done. I'll rest at that point. Thank you very much, and hand over to Pete.
Thanks very much, Brilliant. Yeah, it's great to see some of the questions that are coming in. I'm hoping some of what you talked about gives people the idea about how they can take this from scratch and build it up very, very quickly. So I'm going to run through an actual activity from the toolkit so you can actually have a taster of how that works. Will did these first couple of slides really well for us at the beginning, but we know that this is sponsored by BAYS, the Carbon Literacy Project, and has other collaborators and contributors. It's a fantastic toolkit that's been written with lots and lots of different organisations. So our organisation that's part of that is called Speak Carbon. We're a collective of carbon literacy trainers. So we pool our resources, we come together to make sure that we can do things at scale and pace. And we focus on local authorities, communities, and universities currently because they have the biggest potential for outreach, and parish councils are right at the heart of that community engagement for us. As Speak Carbon, we try to communicate, empower. We want people to join and collectivise with us. We think that is the quickest way to come out and do this. Certainly gaining that accredited carbon literacy certification that Will talked about at the beginning, and make sure that people are prepared to take action together today, so immediately at taking that course. So my name's Pete. Just a little bit about me before I start talking. So I'm not an expert, I'm not a climate expert in any way. You don't need to be a climate expert to facilitate and train in carbon literacy. You do need to have an understanding and a good pair of ears to listen and facilitate, but you don't need to be an expert, and that's the key part. I do study sustainability and behaviour change at master's level, so I do have a good amount of knowledge in that, but you don't need to have that. I always say that I'm not a sustainability angel. You don't need to be a sustainability angel to engage with carbon literacy. You just need to want to listen and want to come and take action. And yeah, my motivation for doing this and for training, for studying is my two kids who are in the picture, still in an IV. You need to have a motivation for coming to a carbon literacy session, but that's about it. You don't need much more. So the part of this toolkit I'm going to take you through is, here we go, communicating climate change. So it's key on a professional level, if you're a councillor, to be able to communicate to your audience, to your community, and the other councillors as well that you have. I've seen some chat messages around some of the problematic side of that. So this following section, this part that we're going to look at, is all about communication. And we know that climate change is perceived in a variety of different ways by people. So in order to get that communication to work, we use a scientific evidence-based study from climate outreach to be able to evaluate the people that we might be speaking to and have a look at ways that we can communicate to them effectively. Now we do this with an activity that I'm going to run you through in a moment, but just quickly to talk about this research. It's a survey of over 10,000 British adults. It's huge, includes 12 focus groups and 35 separate interviews. So it really is evidence-based, and has been really well put together. The results of it give us 7 segments of the UK public when it comes to climate change. So we segment people out and we have a look at what makes people tick, what makes them engage, how do we engage different people who are coming at this from lots of different angles as well. So it's a toolkit designed to help and engage with the British public. It has those 7 segments and helps you, if you want to have a look at this, understand how people think and maybe what brings people together. There's a lot more than what brings people together than we might think when we come at this at the first stage. So instead of going through all 7, we haven't got time to do that, unfortunately, but please, the link will go up. Have a look at this. It really will help you in your capacity as councillors to make that engagement work. I'm just going to go through a couple of the segments that we're going to use in breakout rooms, in discussion rooms amongst us, and we're going to try and think about the ways in which we might engage with these particular segments. So the first segment we're going to look at are these backbone conservatives. They make up 15% of the respondents. They have an ideal United Kingdom that is hardworking, honest, but also, and importantly, it is environmentally friendly. They're particularly concerned about the countryside and the preservation of the countryside as well. And it's really important when we're communicating with people who are in this segment that you stick with those practical, common sense solutions. So nothing too sort of far out there and extreme with this group. Have a look at those climate change impacts on agriculture and have a look at the benefits of local and seasonal produce. And definitely have a look at national leadership success. We have declared a national climate emergency. We have a national climate change piece of legislation that's world beating. So we can talk about those things and instill that pride in this hardworking, honest and environmentally friendly UK. The next section, and I tried to pick two that might have looked a little bit different, are disengaged battlers. This segment make up 12%. They feel unheard and unrepresented, particularly in climate change. But they are convinced of the need to take action. They do think that we need to be doing something. However, they don't really believe that the things that we're doing are going to benefit them. So they're too busy maybe just trying to survive or just trying to get on with life to worry about climate change and all of these things that are going on. And they feel quite fragile and exposed to the economic shocks and environmental downturns that might come across as well. So we're looking here at trying to take the problem into inequality as a big part of the issue, inequality in climate and inequality in social justice problems as well. So we can look at how climate change and climate action might lead to fairer outcomes. How can we build a better society while we're building our resilience and mitigation to climate change? And this group are receptive to credible narratives around fairness and equity. So make sure that you have that credibility, drawing upon those sort of relatable local people and those sort of green projects that are happening that also might lead into these green jobs as well. So we're going to use these two groups. There are 7 to actually look at altogether. We'll have a breakout room session in a second that will get set up for everybody. You will have somebody in that breakout room who has already been prepped and will be able to walk you through everything. We also use a little tool, a linkable tool called a Padlet. The person in your room will be able to help you with that, but that link will go into the chat and you can use that to pick up all of these slides and have a bit of a refresher. So what we're trying to do in our breakout rooms is communicate to those 2 segments, but try and find that common ground. So what climate change framings carry that broad appeal we say here, and you can see some of the things we spoke about that actually all of the groups, all 7 can agree on: green jobs, insulating homes, protecting those future generations as well. So just on the last slide, you will see all 7 of the segments and the activity here that we are looking at. So you will all be split into those breakout rooms. You're looking at those disengaged traditionalists and those backbone conservatives, and you will have, I think now, just over 10 minutes in order to have those discussions. Then we'll come back and have a feedback with the group, see how you found it, see what you thought worked about this activity, and see if you learned anything about communicating as well, which would be fantastic. Hopefully those breakout rooms are all open now.
I will set that up now.
Fantastic. And we'll have until about 1:45. So you'll have about 12 minutes or so. Fantastic, they're just there now. Hello everyone, we're back. As per usual in these groups, Adrian in my group got cut off just as he was making a brilliant point around the fact that action doesn't need to cost too much money and we can use engagement almost for free. So you can go and look at this toolkit and do this engagement without doing that. Do we want to quickly, that the heads of each of the group just want to have a minute, maybe even 30 seconds each, just to talk about how that went? Breakout room 1, Alan, you were in.
Yeah, I'm just going to kick off. We had a bit of a technical issue. We couldn't get people to talk to each other initially. So by the time we ironed it out, I just went in and I facilitated it. So we didn't have a head. We discussed about the actual labels, for want of a better phrase, concerning backbone conservatives and, you know, those sort of approaches. And as parish councils, you realize that you have more than one fraternity within the community. So it's a question of bringing everybody along in relation to the change. And it's understanding as councillors where that sits and how you can influence people. I think that summarizes it in the sense of who's around and who's sat on the table in parish councils, and then influencing members of the public. We didn't get round to actually talking about the tool itself because we were talking about that side of things. So it was very interesting from the fact that, yeah, it is a mirror of society that we were talking about. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Pete.
Fantastic, thanks, Alan. Miranda in room 2.
Oh, yes. Yes, so we had a chat about backbone conservatives, and there was some disagreement as to whether they might be the most resistant to change, and how actually maybe targeting a kind of from their children and grandchildren, and how they might be able to more within a low traffic neighborhood more safely cycle or walk, and visions of kind of these might be the people who set up walking buses to primary schools and things like that. And then disengaged battlers, yeah, it was a real kind of emphasis on that kind of job side of things and trying to help those of kind of lower incomes, like looking at kind of helping fuel poverty and kind of co-benefits of things such as community fridges, which have a food waste focus, but might also help some of those groups. I think that hopefully summarizes roughly.
That sounds brilliant. It's amazing what you can get done in just a few minutes, isn't it? Christiane in group 4.
Thank you. Yeah, so we had similar issues to Alan initially with the unmuting. So we just went a bit off piste, but we had some very good discussions about transport and just generally a good advice from Mike to speak to a message that he feels comes across with every group is about when you talk about reducing energy, how it is reducing costs. So that really seems to always be a good point to go for. But we're specifically talking about transport, some good ideas and some good examples actually what happens in more rural areas, because it's quite difficult to talk about transport if you're going more into villages out in the countryside than when you're talking in the city. But some good examples, some of the residents have already come up with by themselves, really not for climate, but still that's something that could be elaborated on, is car sharing schemes, because the next nearest supermarket is quite some distance away, I think 12 miles, Mike mentioned. So it's maybe building on that, and also EV charging points was mentioned that they want to consider as a parish. And again, that might be something to talk about and work in collaboration with other parish town councils, take that fear away of getting stuck somewhere with your EV car. So absolutely.
Fantastic, thanks so much. I'm just amazed what you can get done in such a short time. So Richard, in group 5, if you've maybe got just 10 seconds or so, I'm just conscious of time.
So we discussed the fact that in order to get this idea across, you've got to find out, you know, what's in it for the people who are involved in the discussion. So in each area, you need to, you know, in Sussex, for instance, floods didn't happen in the last 20 years, but you need to find out the things that are a problem. Yeah. I think once you get people engaged, you find it's difficult to get people engaged because we don't emit a lot, but then people need the education to understand that actually we have the capability of doing a lot as people and as a nation, you know, through the engagement that this provides. And then the last point is that the capital C needs to go to small c in Conservatives. And
we had the same. We had exactly the same point in our group as well. So that can be some feedback. Yeah, it is a small c, but I think it's capitalised because they're. I know. But Will, just very quickly from group 6.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that about the capital C. We'll definitely take that on board. Yeah, so lots of excellent points raised, particularly we spent most of the time thinking about disengaged battlers and sort of promoting messages such as promoting sort of local and seasonal produce and sort of buying local. And we also discussed sort of how we can work together with sort of other organisations within the community, such as churches, for example, to
Sounds like it worked really, really well. We had a great conversation in our group. I can't do it justice, but certainly having those backbone conservatives linking the cars to the countryside and the protection of where they might be living. We talked about second homes, but I won't bring up all of that. And but a really key thing with the disengaged battlers was a point, and we had a good discussion about it, but acknowledging that inequality at the beginning to win that trust. And I thought that was really perceptive, because that's something that we would definitely talk about in carbon literacy, making sure that right at the beginning you're talking about that and you're hitting that face on to win people over. So I'll hand over to you, Will, now to close up.
Fantastic. And yeah, thanks so much, Pete. And I hope you enjoyed the activity. So yeah, so moving on to next steps. So we're having a launch event for the toolkit early next year. So what we'll be doing, we'll be giving a more detailed overview of the materials and officially releasing it. So we very much hope that you will join us then. And then in the meantime, I'd like to signpost you to how you can register your interest in the toolkit. So the best way to do this is to email us at localauthorities@carbonliteracy.com. And then another way that you can stay up to date with the toolkit's progress is to sign up to our local authorities newsletter. And hopefully one of my colleagues will post the link to that in the chat right about now. And there's also a wealth of information and support on our website, www.carbonliteracy.com. And we'll also be creating a webpage specifically for parish and town councils with resources and guidance. Next slide, please. Yeah, just want to say thank you very much for all your questions in the chat. We're just going to pick up on a few of them that we hadn't managed to answer. So in terms of rolling out the toolkit, so it's likely that we'll be running open training sessions where sort of lots of different councillors can sign up to training. And yes, definitely, we're here to promote collaboration and linkages between parish and town councils. Just having a look through for any more questions. So yes, I note that this is based on the MMU toolkit. So project drawdown and En-ROADS aren't actually included within the toolkit, but they are in other toolkits. But the toolkit is great because it allows you to it's designed to be really flexible and adaptable. So it's there for you to put in sort of your own content. And
well, can I just jump in there, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat about this, and it revolves around flexibility, which is what you're talking about. When SOS put this together with Carbon Literacy Project, it was done in a collaborative approach because they appreciated what needed to be done locally. So that way it merged to be a Shropshire training session, basically. That's the beauty of working with the Carbon Literacy Project. They actually can see what's needed locally through the eyes of the people that are coming forward. In answer to the question that Heather Monroe's put in the chat, yes, it's flexible enough in the sense that you can do 2 sessions, so 2 half-day sessions, or you can do it in the evening on 3 evenings, 2.5 hours. Now, obviously, that's down to the trainer and their flexibility as well. What we recommend at SOS is that you don't have them in the afternoon because people tend to fall asleep. Having said that, what we'd like you to do is obviously pick up the carbon literacy training and run with it, because people are, once they've been on board, they are so enthused, and I can assure you of that from our piloted course. And there were 18 members on that, and everyone went away and are doing something, which is brilliant. Thank you, Will.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alan. Another question's just come into the chat. Presumably, the training would be optional for councillors. So essentially, yes, we can't force you all to do carbon literacy training as much as we would love everyone to. To this point, I just wanted to thank all of our guest speakers and let them have a quick opportunity to raise any points that they'd like to make at this stage. Any thoughts from, yeah, Alan?
Yeah, we've actually been approached by SLCC, which is the clerks community where they train the clerks. They've asked us to do an input next year at their webinar summit in March, because as you appreciate, carbon literacy training is not just for councillors. As we did for ours, we actually engaged the clerks and their support staff, because they will do the councillors' bidding. So it's very important to get these people on board, because they talk then the same language as you. If you've done the course, it's good to be talking to the same people, to people who understand what you're on about. I'll leave it at that, Will. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other of the guest speakers like to add anything quickly?
Yeah, I will. I just think I agree with what has already been said. I was answering a question in the chat about the time scale, because in the end, mine was all about availability. So I offered a Saturday, a Thursday, and 2 half-day options. And in the end, it was down to availability of, and so we ended up doing a whole one-day one. But the course is designed, it's so varied between you doing a bit of presentation, group discussions. My Zoom actually didn't work on the day, so it wasn't as super smooth as I'd hoped, but it still worked. And because the activities are varied and there are frequent breaks built in, and because it was so collaborative, it didn't feel like kind of a whole day of listening. It's not like that, it's much more collaborative. And then also I just think, so my next stage is that the officers of my own town council, I'll train them. But the one that I did, the fact that we had councillors from neighbouring councils as well, I think really added to it, because there were areas that we had, we had lots of ideas that we could just, let's forget about the boundaries. Climate change doesn't recognise parish boundaries, so why should we? There are lots of things like electric bike rental hubs or better bus services locally that we can kind of mob up to some extent to kind of ask our county council to come and talk to us about, even though other things may be very, very different. So that would be kind of a top tip for me, that to try and get different councillors involved, because you get a wider range of opinion and idea.
Yep. Thanks very much for that, Belinda. So Jan's just asking, who is the speaker from Lyme? So that was Belinda that you just heard just now. Be more than happy to put you in touch. And Fiona just said, I know you said this is being recorded. Will there be a link we can share with others? Yes, we're hoping that we will be able to send you a recording of that, Fiona. At this point, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and a special big thank you to our guest speakers, not only for all their insights and contributions today, but for all their help in the development and the testing of the materials. And we also wanted to thank the National Association of Local Councils, who very kindly granted us permission to use best practice case studies within the toolkit. So we really hope you enjoyed this event. And if you have any questions or want to get started, please email us at localauthorities@carbonliteracy.com. Our next event starts at 3:30, where local authorities will be showcasing their delivery of carbon literacy training. There's a separate link to this event which we will post in the chat now. And if you'd like to join us for that, we'd love to have you there. So all that's left for me to do is to say thank you very much, and look forward to hearing from you soon.